Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, the only podcast hosted by two of the NRF's top retail voices. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Our guests in this episode live from the Narvar Podcast Studio at the NRF Big Show, in person, in New York. In this special promotional interview are Henry Spear, Senior Vice President, Digital and Customer Care, JD Sports, and David Morin, Vice President, Customer Strategy at Narvar. After the interview, we'll be back with the remarkable story of the week and what is on our radar screens. Now, a little bit of behind the scenes for the people listening. These promotional interviews where we feature a vendor, partner of ours, and one of their clients, they just don't happen. We worked together with the folks at Narvar for quite a while to find just the right customer to get on the mic and really help the listeners make sense of what's going on. All right, let's jump into news of the week, and you start with a good pun. Shoes dropping, second shoes dropping at Saks Global. What's going on?
Yes,
they were in the news.
Shoes are dropping. In this case, they're designer shoes. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly. If you're keenly interested in this, my Pardon the Disruption Substack, I go quite a bit deeper on not only the particular stores that are closing, but some of the things that I think, based upon my general knowledge, but also my specific knowledge, working at Neiman Marcus and working on some things over the years. I'll get into that. So I'm going to resist the temptation to go in a lot of detail. But big picture here, this story is important because it has a lot of impact on both the fashion and the real estate market. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the shuttering of most of Saks Global off-price stores. So that's Saks Off Fifth and Neiman Marcus Last Call stores, as well as the e-commerce site. Well, this past week, the next shoe to drop here is that Saks Global are closing 9 full lines, so the department stores here, not the off-price stores. 8 of those are branded Saks Fifth Avenue. 1 is Neiman Marcus. Now, broadly speaking, what's going on here is several of them, 5 in particular, are in smaller markets like Tulsa and Birmingham. The other 4, and this is what I think is going to be the most interesting going forward, is where there are overlapping locations. Now, in this particular case, they are not in the same mall. I'll get to that a little bit more in a second. But they are 4 of the 5 are in markets where very clearly the Neiman Marcus store is the superior location. So 4 Saks Fifth Avenue stores closing. The other one in Boston is interesting. Last week we talked about Simon Property Group's doing some reinventions of some of their malls. Well, there's now another one that is going to be going on because the Neiman Marcus store in Copley Place in Boston is closing, and Simon's going to redevelop that space. But there is a Saks Fifth Avenue store literally like a 4-minute walk away in the Prudential Center that will be staying open. So I think these are not at all surprising. I think they're layups in terms of making decisions. Now, more to come. In fact, I think the more significant announcements will be coming, who knows, could be next week, could be a month, might take a little bit longer because there are many more overlapping stores. Now, some of them are in the exact same mall. You and I, as an example, visited the Fashion Show Mall in Las Vegas where there's a Saks at the back and a much better Neiman Marcus store. I can't imagine, but if you want to see the stores that I think are going to close or the ones that are on the chopping block, go to my Substack. But it also wouldn't surprise me. 2 things wouldn't surprise me. One is that there's a few more of these smaller market stores that I think are of questionable profitability that still might close. But there also might be some lease extensions to give Saks and Neiman's time to figure out, could the brands be repositioning and coexist in a few markets, like, say, Beverly Hills? Is there some negotiation, because Simon and Brookfield are the owners in a lot of cases, to give them more time to work out what they're going to do? So anyway, more to come, but I suspect we'll hear quite a bit more fairly quickly.
We have some other information moving on from the market that helps us broaden the lens a bit. I mean, all this is happening within a context, right? And talk about, you pointed to some more evidence of luxury's tale of 2 cities, so to speak.
Yeah, we touched on this last week, so I'll be quick about it, but we're going to be getting more and more news on this. So one is just the environment that Neiman's and Saks are trying to reorganize their way into is pretty challenged. But bigger picture on a global stage is Kering. So Kering is one of the luxury conglomerates similar to, but much smaller than LVMH. But they are the owner of brands like Gucci, like Yves Saint Laurent, like Balenciaga. So some pretty high-profile global brands. they've had 3 years of falling sales, particularly at Gucci. I think the Gucci business has, been down like 20% each of those last 3 years. Relatively new CEO who's going to be announcing a more comprehensive reinvention plan soon. But he did say with the announcement of their earnings where sales were down 9% overall, a little worse at the Gucci brand, and also they moved from making some money to losing some money. He did say they expect that they will return to growth later this year, and they should be able to stabilize and perhaps improve their margins. So Wall Street like that. But let's just say so far, not a lot of evidence. Same time, I'll just mention this really briefly. Hermès reported their earnings, and they continue to do extremely well. Sales up, great profits. So yeah, it really, it's just not enough to be high-end because clearly Kering has some very high-end brands. It has a lot to do with whether or not you're really executing well as have that kind of positioning that the market's responding to across the globe.
Here in Canada, a familiar name, Toys R Us, just wrapped up its second life going into bankruptcy, probably liquidation. But that's not the only retail story and not the only retailer in trouble.
Well, again, more bifurcation here because an angel gets its wings every single time I say bifurcation. Many people that follow my work will know that I use this little mantra: the collapse of the unremarkable middle continues unabated. Toys R Us, first in the U.S., really pulling back, and now in Canada. But Francesca's, that U.S. folks will know, has been a pretty good-sized specialty retailer chain. They filed for Chapter 11 a little bit ago. They are closing all 450 stores, not particularly large stores, but that's a lot of stores to close. Eddie Bauer, which has been around for a long time, they are owned by Catalyst, which happens to be the holding company that also owns JCPenney. They look to be, I guess it's not totally certain, but it looks like they may be closing all or most of their stores in Chapter 11. So that's quite a lot of stores as well. But the happy story here, though, or the flip side of this in the bifurcation is there are certainly plenty of stores opening, thousands every year. Just two I will lift up. One, Tractor Supply, which is already, I think, close to 2,000 stores or something, or on their way to 2,000 stores. They're opening 100 stores this year. Aritzia, a brand we've talked about a few times. We may have some more news on Aritzia in the not too distant future. I'll tease that. They now see a potential of 200 stores in the U.S. So for kind of high-end specialty retailer, that's a good amount of stores. So they are on fire. So really, tale of two cities, whether we're talking luxury or whether we're talking more mid or value-priced retail.
So the talk of the grocery industry has been for the past couple of months, who is going to take the reins over at Kroger? We got our answer last week.
For international listeners that may not be as familiar, Kroger, I believe, is the fourth biggest retailer in North America, 4 or 5. So huge retailer. They are the biggest pure grocer. Now, Walmart has bigger market share. Costco is bigger, but not all grocery.
Amazon.
Amazon, obviously, we talked about last week, or several times really over the last few months. So, new boss at Kroger, a guy named Greg Boren. I'm not sure that's how you pronounce his name. He represents a lot of firsts. He is the first CEO from outside the company and the first CEO at Kroger that was born outside the U.S.
Shout out to New Zealand.
But he has a ton of retail experience down at Woolworth and other retailers outside of North America, but most notably probably and kind of a little bit more recently, he ran Walmart US, particularly during the time when they made a lot of changes to the company, really dialed up the digital side. And it's also nice to see an old guy get a big job. He is, I think, just turned 65. Not that I know any other 65-year-olds in the retail industry, but whoever I'm talking about does have a birthday the day this episode comes out. So send your gifts my ways. But he certainly has his hands full. The business at Kroger, they've gone through a lot, failed merger with Albertsons, CEO leaving on not exactly great terms. You can read about that if you're particularly interested. And sales have been pretty much stagnant for the last couple of years. I believe their last quarterly report, their sales were up just over 2%, which, depending upon how you want to think about inflation, is a bit less than the growth you would expect from inflation. So it'll be interesting to see what he'll get up to. He doesn't seem to be a shrinking violet. Seems to be willing to take some pretty aggressive effort. So we'll I expect to start to hear some bold moves there in the next few months.
It's an interesting story because it's a brand and a retailer that's had massive distraction over the past 2 years with their failed acquisition of Albertsons. His reputation precedes him. He's a real store guy, spends a Saturday in stores. Yep. And, if you're a store manager, you're going to get a congratulations or a long list of things to do before Monday morning. So it's clearly they were looking for some rigor in their store operations. Not clearly, but I'm sure he brings lots of other talents. But that's certainly a big one. Now let's talk about Costco, because every time we talk about this performance, Costco continues to ring up numbers that are just eye-opening, really.
Yeah, Costco is unusual. People may know that they report sales every month. So we're waiting on their quarterly earnings, which I think about a month away from now. So we'll, I'm sure, talk about that when we actually get it. But yeah, the numbers, I know I'm like a broken record on this, but these hyper scalers, the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Costcos, on a humongous base. So for the 4 weeks just ended, where they did a tidy $21 billion in just 4 weeks.
Wow.
That's pretty good. Their net sales rose 9.3%. So that's a mix of an above average comp number, as well as they continue to open some stores. Their digital business up over 20%. So I suspect when we do hear their earnings, they are going to be quite good.
That's a wrap on the news. Let's now get to our great interview with Henry Speer from JD Sports, David Morin from Narvar. Then stay tuned. We'll be back with the remarkable story of the week and what's on our radar screen.
Well, we're back again in the Narvar remote podcast studio at the NRF Big Show. On the floor, a lot of buzz going around, and we have two really excellent guests. Welcome, David. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Let's just jump into it, but to kind of give everybody a little bit of a context of who they're listening to, maybe just ask each of you to take a few seconds to explain a little bit about who you are and what you do. Henry, you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Henry Speer. I'm SVP of Digital for North America for JD Sports. I have been in this industry for 20 plus years, started my career in merchandising and sort of worked my way into this digital landscape. And it's been a really fun journey, and I'll stop there and give it to David.
Sure. So I'm David. I'm the Vice President of Customer Strategy and Success at Narvar. For those listeners who maybe aren't familiar, Narvar is the leading post-purchase provider in retail, working with over 1,500 retailers. And at my role, I've been at Narvar for the last 8 years. I often like to say I grew up in retail at Narvar, working really alongside all of our customers that we work with, including teams like Henry's team at JD. Really thinking through, what does Narvar see as the industry landscape? What do we hear from our customers as the industry landscape? What do we kind of see outwardly of the consumer landscape, and bring all those three things together and work with our retailers and partners to really build out the best experiences they can.
I'm sure many people will be familiar with JD, but perhaps not all. So just maybe a quick overview of JD Sports.
Yeah, JD Sports is a sports fashion retailer based out of the UK. So we have a long heritage and history in UK and EMEA. More recently, entered into the North American market through the acquisition of Finish Line, which a lot of people will recognize, especially from those mall-based shoppers ages ago. We really sit at this intersection of sports and fashion, and that's our big differentiator. When you think about the traditional model of going into a store and buying sneakers off of a wall, yes, we still do that, but we also bring a lot more from a merchandising, outfitting, and experience perspective. We're also a massively global company. We operate in over 30 countries. We have over 3,000 stores, including about 600 here in North America. So we are continuing on this journey of really bringing JD Sports to market here in the U.S. especially, and creating that unique customer experience that separates us from the other competitors in our space right now.
Let's unpack your operating experience a little bit. And in the context of your colleagues and other retailers, you have a very complex, or certainly a scale, you're global, that adds complexity. But what do you think, as an operator today and retailers going into 26, they might underestimate in terms of complexity, and whether it's in the environment or the operating environment or the tool set? Or
I think what ends up happening with our space is consumer demands change constantly, and that's both demand for products, but that's also demands on how they discover and experience those products. We'll hear a lot of talk about
customer journey, really.
Exactly.
Right?
We'll hear a lot about AI. Obviously
what?
NRF.
Wait.
Yeah. Can you believe?
What is this AI you speak of?
And
Does
I
that
think
stand for something?
yeah, exactly. And I think the challenge there is how broad that definition is and what that actually means to a consumer. And I think where some retailers are struggling is figuring out how is that customer actually shopping, how is that customer experiencing our brand, and then how do they actually want to be serviced ultimately. And I think looking at the journey not just from the first footstep into the door through that transaction or that first visit to a website through the post-purchase journey is different now because the customer is thinking, shopping, exploring, and discovering in ways that they never have before. And so that is something that is extremely challenging right now because I have to not only be aware of what that on-site experience is like or that post-purchase experience is like, I have to think about how that customer is actually experiencing and interacting with our brand or the products that we sell at all these various touch points. And so, overseeing digital, it's the site experience, but it's also the marketing, and then it's also, in some ways, like the psyche of where that consumer is thinking about our brand and the products that we sell.
And David, I was drawn to Narvar because I love talking about returns, because I think it's such a fundamental element of the business model, and it's an opportunity for success. How do you think about the changing role in the customer journey, and what do you guys do to, add perspective and think about it?
I feel really lucky to work at Narvar because I think Narvar was really the first company in the space almost 15 years ago, really thinking about how customer experience, particularly in post-purchase, can be a differentiator. So when we say post-purchase, we think about everything that happens right about at the buy button and everything else after that. So as the customer is waiting for their shipment, after it's been delivered, if there's any sort of follow-up action like a return that's needed, how do you really think about that as a connected part of the customer journey? Where we are now, and I think Henry touched on this a little bit, is how he thinks about it in his role, is that truly consumers, I think, are savvier than ever. I often say that when I first started at Narvar, I thought about post-purchase as a differentiated luxe experience. I think where we are today is that post-purchase experience is really table stakes in the overarching customer journey.
That's interesting.
And all aspects of customer or post-purchase, consumers expect and have a higher level of what good is in that experience. They now expect to be communicated with. They now expect to have multiple channels to go through for support if they need anything. And then in returns, I absolutely agree. That is such a critical moment and touch point in the customer journey as you think about how do you get that customer back to you. I think two stories that I've said a lot at this show. One, I was wearing a really fabulous shirt yesterday, and a lot of people.
You are today, by the way.
To be fair,
to be fair.
And a lot of people ask me,
where
did you get that shirt? I'm like, the internet. But I actually,
have you heard of it?
Yeah, but I actually got it on like an Instagram ad, and I'm pretty wary of it. Got attracted to it, and the first thing I did before I made a purchase decision is I looked at the return policy to see, okay, if I buy this kind of weird targeted thing on Instagram, how hard is it going to be for me to have some sort of follow-up action like
how locked in am I on this purchase?
Or like, am I going to have to call or write an email
big hassle,
or pay money, which sometimes is okay.
Yeah.
And again, like, especially with the ubiquitous of choice that consumers have now in the market, and I think there's a lot of this on the acquisition side, consumers are willing to brand switch faster and quicker more than ever if something doesn't go to their delight. And returns are seen as a frictionless experience. So providing that connected customer experience, and especially in any sort of follow-up action needed, is actually really, really pivotal to that next purchase with a brand.
So Henry, we already touched the AI third rail here. I don't know if it's the third rail or not, but people that have been at the show, anybody paying attention to the show, or frankly probably reading anything in retail today, we keep hearing about agentic commerce. Tell us a little bit about how you're looking at that, and I guess, we're interested in specifically what you're doing, but also maybe for our audience, like how do you separate the signal from the noise? How do you know what's just experimentation versus the things that are maybe really ready to commit to more seriously?
Yeah, I'm waiting for like a banner to drop because you said agentic commerce. Right? It's like
ding, 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 ding.
I think of that confetti that goes up there.
Where there is confusion right now is the definition of agentic, and the way that I like to think about it is there is the discovery component of agentic commerce, right? Like, and this is what you hear a lot about when you think about GEO or AEO and getting prepared to actually show up in the various LLMs, right? So I'm looking for a specific pair of sneakers for a specific event, and I'm a size 10, and I want them to be black and white, right? There's that component, which is a huge positioning play for retailers right now, right? How do you make sure that you are actually present and showing up in these LLMs in a way that you want to be represented? Because the flip side of that is you can show up in a way that isn't favorable to your brand, right? So you want to show up and make sure that you're talking about not only the products that maybe you have available to sell, but also the features, benefits, and all the unique selling points that you would have for those various products. And if you're really good, you're also communicating to the customer why you should buy from me versus someone else, right? So there's this entire discovery component, which I think is where people have really started to dip their toe in the water. But then the actual dream state is this entire agentic run, end-to-end experience from both discovery all the way through purchase and ultimately post-purchase, right? So I'd be remiss in a Narvar booth to not mention post-purchase. When you think about that end-to-end experience, that is, I think, the buzziest and the most interesting piece, and it's something that you'll see a lot of announcements that have happened over the past few days, including JD Sports.
Right, a quick follow-up. I've seen some big announcements about everybody coming together, and it feels like, is everybody just going to wind up using the same platforms, and is that just going to, everybody's going to see the same results, or can you gain advantage from the deals that you make with platforms when they're doing deals with everybody else? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so we're on Commerce Tools from an e-com platform perspective, and what we're doing with Commerce Tools is working with them to be effectively LLM agnostic. I think we've seen some really unique partnerships and announcements come out that are very specific to one LLM, and from my perspective, if we're talking about you want to be present with the consumer wherever they want to discover you, which I mentioned earlier, I don't want to be specific to one LLM as it exists right now. I want to be available wherever that customer is going through their discovery
formally
journey.
Or informally, right? Because
exactly.
It feels like up until now, retailers have been trying to develop authority in whatever ways they can informally, but now they're cutting formal deals with the different LLMs.
Correct.
Not just one, though. There's multiple partnerships.
Exactly.
Do you think you might go that way?
I see it as it's too early. When I see these announcements that are exclusive deals, my concern is we've all lived in an age where there was a preferred vendor or provider for something that then lost favor with the consumer.
I ran my site on Netscape, and that didn't work out all that well, right?
Exactly. And if you think about the proliferation of web providers, email providers, various SaaS vendors that we've all probably worked with at different points that may not exist anymore, I think I get nervous to go all in on one because the consumer is still really figuring out how they want to experience this. And I think about agentic commerce as how do we make sure that we are present in both discovery and then refine the experience to make sure that when they are actually transacting with that agent, that it's a great experience. Because right now, it feels very early to commit. Exactly.
Could be.
And it could also be terrible. And then as a rapidly growing brand, especially in the North American market, JD Sports, I want to make sure that your first interaction with us is the best possible interaction. And I have yet to see a true agentic experience that feels like it is going to be the best representation of my brand, and it's still really important for me as a retailer to own that branded experience.
One quick follow-up, and then I'll pass the mic to Steve. Does it feel like, for either of you, that consumers now are giving a little permission for AI to be wrong, that they understand that it's not perfect, that there's a bit of forgiveness, in other words? Do you get that sense? Henry, David?
Well, I think many consumers maybe don't know that AI is sometimes wrong, and I think if I'm stepping into Henry's shoes and even thinking about what Narvar is setting out to do in the agentic space, I think that's the really careful part about implementing true consumer-facing tech right now, because I think we know that there is still some hallucinations. I think on the Narvar side, what we're really focused on, starting with the introduction of Navi, thinking through how do we harness our data and start out with use cases that we're already solving today in kind of more of a configuration workflow and bringing those into the agentic space so that we can kind of start with the industry in the things that we know today to be true and to own. I'm curious your perspective on that as well, especially as a brand.
We are on the ride with the consumer as well, right? In the sense of we are leveraging AI and agents to power various things in our organization. And so it is figuring out what is the tolerance level for those mistakes and errors that I think is really important. And this is where, when you think about being present in the various models, you do want to make sure that you are setting yourself up for a best-in-class experience for the consumer to try to mitigate hallucinations, wrong facts, anything like that. So for me, I think some consumers understand there's still mistakes, but I'm not 100% sure on what the tolerance level is.
The window's closing.
Mistakes. Yeah.
Window's closing.
Yeah. So maybe pull back a little bit. I'm curious, particularly if you're here at the NRF Big Show, so many different tech providers working on so many different issues. And even if we just think about the customer journey, not some of the other fulfillment, whatever might be going on here, how do you prioritize what to work on? One of the models I've used with some of my clients is to think about the customer journey and try to find those pain points, friction points, but also places to do what I really call amplify the wow. Do something remarkable that can really differentiate your brand. But even, with that kind of glib, high-level thing, it's still not so easy to do. But I'm curious, just like sort of in general, how you approach where to put your attention. But even then, you probably have way more things to focus on than you possibly can. So how do you identify that? How do you try to value the investment that goes into them? And then, David, I'll come back to you, too, because you see this across a whole spectrum of clients.
Yeah, and David's competing with various tech roadmaps, right, to get on there and be prioritized. And I look at it two ways. I think the point that you brought up is probably the first one is what are the biggest customer pain points or friction points that we want to address? And then there's also this idea around what are the opportunities to create moments that are unique and different for us. We're a multi-brand retailer, and so ultimately our products are available at other retailers. And so
Sure.
So for me, it's an experience, and how do you create a different experience? And so when we are evaluating products, it's not just purely revenue or that customer pain point. It's also how do we differentiate ourselves in the marketplace? Things like agentic commerce is an opportunity for differentiation, and not just being a first mover or somebody that's participating in that space, but how do we actually be the best represented on in the various models and on the various LLMs in a way that the customer is going to positively respond to.
David, how about you? What are you seeing with other clients?
Yeah, I mean,
and I guess sorry to interrupt, but also I guess another thing is are there any kind of categories of retailers where you see meaningfully different approaches?
Well, I think the first thing, and we hear this a lot, I'm sure other guests have said that, I think what's really exciting about being at NRF this year, last year everyone was clearly just learning. And I think this year is the first time we've been at the show floor, and the conversations we've had this week have been really detailed, in-depth discussions with tech and digital and e-com leaders about what are your capabilities and how do we start to think about road mapping, which I think is a really exciting signal in the industry that we've gone from people, trying to just understand the landscape to really be interested in thinking through how do they start to harness the power of agentic commerce and AI to actually drive new experiences. I think from the road mapping, I think every retailer is on their different journey. Certainly, one of the two things I think will happen. One, we work with a couple or many retailers that are pretty far along already on their thinking of how to use automation and self-service to reduce things in the post-purchase space. Today, that's largely, I would say, within the customer support space, automating Wizmo calls, automating claims, automating returns. So those retailers who already have been on that journey in their maybe configurable chatbots are really, really primed to start accelerating that experience already. I think the other exciting thing is we're starting to see retailers maybe skip level, maybe didn't have a bot at all, and they're just going to kind of leapfrog right into the agentic space and do it potentially quicker and more nimbly than those retailers who are going to have to maybe unpack the existing and figure out what worked and didn't work, and really go right into that space of okay, we know we're behind, and these are the bets we want to make. We haven't invested in something like a chatbot. How do we really think about all of the comprehensive solutions that an automated chatbot through agent-to-agent experience could do? And then how do we start to tap the different either internal data sources or partners like Narvar to really build out those experiences at scale and at speed?
Well, listen, we're coming up on our time. So I wanted to just, the last question, tap into some of your advice and wisdom. We've circled around, what's going to differentiate probably winning retailers from retailers to be less successful in this space. But as you think about advice to your fellow retailers, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things they just absolutely need to get right in 2026? And that's a question for both of you. Henry, start us off.
Yeah. continuing to be curious about all of the things that are out there. The advantage of coming to something like NRF is there is a lot of noise, but you also get a lot of perspective, and you start to hear about what's actually working for people, because I think there's a lot of hypotheses right now about what's going to be the best in the next few years as potentially customers change their shopping behavior. And so I think continuing to be curious and listening and learning, and also exploring yourself with agentic commerce and AI. I think
like
it's
personally, like in your daily life.
Exactly.
Kind of thing,
And whether that's true use cases of actually completing a transaction with an agent and understanding what that experience is like as a consumer. But in addition, just understanding how the various models work and how you might be interacting with it for things maybe not directly related to shopping, right? It might be about cooking or something else, just to understand how that consumer behavior is working, because I think it would be remiss to make broad assumptions about how people are actually interacting with these models.
Steve, have you done a transaction through AI yet? I haven't.
I've done exploration, but I haven't completed a transaction.
Yeah, it's great advice.
And what's stopping you, right? It's a seamless experience, or at least it should be as it exists today, right? So,
beautiful.
And then I would just say the continued exploration of the consumer journey. You know, we talked a little bit about it, but I think the journey I said it at the beginning, it's longer and broader than I think it ever has been. And so figuring out ways to be present amongst the journey, not just before purchase and exploration, but also post is really important, because that's a consumer expectation now.
David, what about you? You talk to a lot of people. You've been talking to a lot of people at this show, but let's boil it all down, because we're in an elevator.
No pressure.
We're in an elevator. You got to you got to do these things.
Yeah, well, I think I'm actually going to take a nice segue from Henry from there. While most retailers today are thinking about post-purchase as a critical point in the customer journey, many retailers still have like acquisition and purchase over here and post-purchase here, and haven't fully unified that customer journey. And I think that's going to be a really important first step to actually thinking, how do you use AI and agentic commerce to accelerate it? If it's already bifurcated, you're going to have a bifurcated experience.
And that might be in corporate structure as well, right?
Absolutely.
Like who owns
the
perennial question, who owns the customer, but who owns that experience? That needs to connect more, integrate.
100%. I've had that same conversation with probably 4 different retailers today, who have been like, why do these two teams own
typically
these two
it's
different
operations
things?
owns returns or someone. It's not always
that actually can sit lots of places too. Right. So good point. I think the next one, which is kind of tied together, is there's so much dollar and attention being spent on acquisition. As all of us know, the cost of acquisition is so much higher. How do you start to think about the same acquisition strategies in post-purchase, and specifically around personalization? Obviously, I know that's a huge buzzword, but it's true. The power of AI and the power of harnessing data can really allow you to be hyper-personalized, both in the acquisition and search space, but also in the post-purchase space as well. So how do you start to think through building out programs and experiences and journeys that are using the same personalization strategies in the purchase cycle, and think about how do you apply them into returns?
So say more about that. Is that like, I see you've returned these 3 things. Clearly we're not getting it right with you. Can we help? Here's what we'd suggest. Is that integration you're talking about?
That's a great one. I think we also think through things of not all customers are created equal, and not all returns are created equal as well. So how do you start to think through treating your best customers differently, making sure you understand who their customers are, using solutions like Narvar's Iris Intelligence to understand Henry maybe has never shopped at JD before, but he's a great customer. For this return, to make sure he comes back and purchases for you again, maybe you want to make sure it's as easy as possible, give him his refund faster. Conversely, if Henry's brother is maybe not a great customer, maybe you want to use intelligence to create some friction in that experience. Maybe send him to a store where he might be able to kind of be resold, or kind of think at a cost, things of that nature. So really thinking to that hyper-personalization in the post-purchase experience, knowing how critical it is, and knowing how treating either your first-time customer or a really, really loyal customer well in that returns experience is really going to accelerate that repurchase. And so I think that then all gets retailers ready to start thinking, then how do you really take the power of agentic commerce with that unified experience and that personalized strategy to really do something cool on the different platforms wherever the agents may live.
Yeah, before we wrap, I really like, and you didn't say this exactly, but so correct me if I'm not stating it right, but I think, there's such a mentality of returns being a cost center as opposed to a loyalty builder, ROI, engagement builder. Obviously, there are costs associated with it, but thinking about that more intelligently, strategically, I think makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think if you think about the quickest way to lose a customer is to make a return experience really challenging, right? Mm-hmm. If you've ever had a bad return experience, and I'm sure we all have, you probably don't want to go back to that retailer. So I think there's as you think about the opportunity for win-backs, et cetera, it is an interesting space to capitalize on, making it positive.
I'd love to tell a story. I know I'm running out of time because I think it's an illumination of that exact thing. I spend a lot of time at conferences, as most of us do, and I was recently at a conference last year talking to a woman over a cocktail. She's like, Narvar, what does Narvar do? And I explained it, and she's like, returns. And I saw like the wheels turning in her head, and she's thinking, and she's like, returns are important. And I was like, tell me more.
Say more?
Yeah.
Yes.
And she was like, recently I bought a chandelier, and I was really excited, and I spent a lot of time online trying to go to the discovery process and the purchase process, and they delivered it, and it was white glove, and it came, and I opened it, and I just didn't like it. And the first thing that went through my head was fear. I have this large item, it's freight. How in the world am I going to return this? Like, this is going to be a nightmare, dread in her face. And so she said, so then I went online and I figured out, I called them, and they sent a scheduled delivery to her, white glove pickup the next day, took it out of her house. She was so relieved. And she told me, so the next thing I did is I sat on my couch and I was like, you know what, though? I still need a chandelier. And the first thing she did is open that same retailer's website and started to shop again because of how much peace of mind and trust they built in that experience. She's still a consumer. She still wants something, and she's going to go back and buy
and hopefully
again.
the next chandelier as well, because,
Exactly.
that bonding thing, right?
Though most people don't buy a ton of chandeliers,
Well,
I'm saying,
Not
Depends how big your house is.
to be judgy here. Not to be judgy
I guess people have learned about the size of my house. Smallish.
Well, gentlemen, it's been such a treat chitting and chatting with you. Like I said, I love talking about returns, and we really appreciate you taking the time at a busy show to spend some time with Steve and I here in the Narvar Podcasting Studio, which has been just a wonderful addition, and it's been a wonderful resource for us being here at this intersection. People love it, so thank you to Narvar particularly, and Henry, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, we are back. What's your remarkable story of the week, Steve?
Well, I'll use this opportunity to remind people, because I had a conversation the other day about when I say remarkable, what I mean. And I mean it largely in the way that Seth Godin uses it in his book, Purple Cow, which is, yes, different, unusual, but also literally that people will talk about it, that it's buzzworthy, hopefully in a generally good way. This one is a little bit more whiny, perhaps, but point of privilege as the co-host here. Neil Saunders, past guest on the pod and somebody whose work we admire a lot. We were in a little bit of conversation because Neil posted a comment that I have posted over the years, which is the news seems to gravitate to the month-over-month sales reports from the U.S. from either the Census Bureau or what we have now, or had for a little while, the NRF CNBC data, which are similar, but I won't go into the differences. But anyway, both of them basically said that month-over-month sales were essentially flat, and the news reports was kind of, oh my God, retail is really slowing down. And actually the stock market had a reaction to this. Well, were sales actually down or flat? No, actually sales were up quite a lot because, as I hope most of our audience would know, nobody pays a whit of attention to month-over-month numbers. We pay attention to year-over-year numbers. And if you look at the year-over-year numbers, whether you're looking at the U.S. Census Bureau or the NRF,
Any numbers.
They were up.
By any measure.
And in fact, yes, by any measure. And most categories, because they do a little category breakout, were also up, with the exception really of home improvement, which continues to be weak. There's a little bit of a difference between the U.S. Census Bureau and the NRF data in terms of whether there was an acceleration in trend, which is worth paying attention to. Mm-hmm. If December was up 5% year over year, but January was up only 3.5%, you could say that there's a slowing of trend. Sure. Though, importantly, still a positive number for those of you keeping score at home. So anyway, I think it's remarkable because it's very hard for me to believe that people that cover the retail industry, and I'm not going to call out any names at major newspapers or TV channels, still continue to anchor their story on this. And it's totally misleading and largely may drive you to, in fact, the complete opposite conclusion
right.
of what the story says. So what? Who cares? We should care because it's, I hate to say fake news, but it's kind of fake news. That is my whiny...
Good rant.
Good rant. Get off my lawn commentary for the week. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
All right. Well, I'm heading over to Australia and New Zealand, speaking of New Zealand earlier in the show, with an important decision with Bunnings. And we've had the Bunnings CEO, GM, Michael Schneider, on the show a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. A brilliant leader, and Bunnings is just an incredible brand, home improvement brand. For those who don't know, you should know Bunnings. Anyway, they had a very important decision in the courts that retailers around the world and here are paying attention to, allowing AI machine vision cameras to do their work and help stem the tide of violence against associates. Michael Schneider did a great job of continuing to just harp on this with the judiciary and say, listen, we need this because we have to identify the bad people who are coming in and literally threatening or committing violence against the associates. I mean, it's one thing to talk about LP and dollars lost, but this is battling against privacy and against all other things, ignoring the daily health and safety risks to people, to associates. So good for him. I think many regulators will be looking to this for direction. Australia and New Zealand, well thought of from those kind of things. I mean, it happens here, right? Like I was talking to a CEO, and his associates in some stores have to wear stab vests. Imagine going to work having to wear a stab vest. No. Anyway, we need some help. Clearly, it's not a retail issue; it's a society issue. But this would help identify the repeat bad guys and just get the right evidence and all that AI stuff working in our favor.
Can I use this as an opportunity to special shout out? We talked about the Kiwis, the new leader at Kroger, and we talked about Bunnings in Australia. We actually have quite a lot of listeners down in that part of the world. So just thanks to listening. And every once in a while, we get some nice love and
thanks,
shout outs on LinkedIn or nice messages. Yes, in particular, Tony.
One day, Steve, you and I will go there in person and do a show. Anyone listening,
there you go.
Tickets are available at the DFW airport. What's on the radar screen for you?
Well, I'm starting to get, not that I wasn't interested before, but we've talked about Target and the new leadership and the need for a turnaround there. Well, things are starting to happen. I think just last week, right, we talked about Michael Fidelki. I'm sure I'm pronouncing his last name incorrectly. I'll have to remember to check that out. Just Mike. We'll call him Mike. Some leadership changes. First of all, their two longtime veterans, their chief growth officer and chief merchant for apparel and home, are retiring. Or being retired, I guess, depending upon how you want to look at that. Mm-hmm. They've created, or I guess reestablished, an overall chief merchant role. So Cara Sylvester is moving into, so she's a current senior executive at Target. She's moving into that role. And another longtime executive, Lisa Roth, also probably butchering her name, she's been promoted to chief operating officer. And there are a couple of other positions like chief guest experience officer, I think is the title, that they are looking to fill. So it looks like the top team already several key changes, but several more to come. It looks like they might be looking on the outside for a couple of those positions. Also, and I think this is super important because we've talked about what some of the challenges are in terms of Target's performance deteriorating over the last couple of years. They are making a several $100 million investment into increasing staffing in the stores, and also they're going to fund that, I guess, with reduction of some overhead in regional offices and their supply chain. So it's going to be some time before the numbers will really move. So none of this will be reflected in the Target earnings we're going to get in a week or two, I guess. And it's a big hill to climb. But I would expect that some of the changes will be more evident if you go into stores, because there are things like not only the staff availability, but whether they're doing better from an in-stock perspective and what other merchandise
Sometimes
changes.
you can see, yes. Some of these things will be more visible than others, yeah.
Yeah, and the product line changes will take more. I mean, Kara, is just moving into that job. You're not going to see some of her moves until the fall, probably best case. So I would not assume if there aren't significant changes in their performance in the next quarter that means a lot. It's definitely, this is a multi-year sort of change, but some foundational things starting to happen.
Well, I'm looking forward to the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a $6 billion engineering marvel linking our two great nations, Detroit and Windsor, entirely funded by me, my tax dollars, the government of Canada, joint owned by Canada and the great state of Michigan, built with skilled tradespeople from both sides of the border. Get this, 25% of all trade between Canada and the U.S. crosses the older privately owned Ambassador Bridge. So there's a lot of retailers paying attention to what happens here because they are looking forward to a much more efficient, modern transportation. Now, the Detroit owner was in the news. I put a call into Howard. Whoops, I went to Epstein Island, and believe me, all I got was this lousy T-shirt Lutnick, who then dialed the president, who then tweeted about Canada mistreating the United States. Certainly this bridge was imagined a expansion of trade, not a contraction of trade. Now, coincidentally, a coalition of 100 of state-level ag associations this week published a letter saying, we love CUSMA, as we know it here in Canada, the USMCA, because it has made us, guess what? A lot of money. So as you often say, facts are stubborn things. So I'm looking forward to this. It's an engineering marvel. It's actually shaped like the edge of a hockey stick. It's a beautiful thing. Go online and check it out. But, it's another great reduction of any kind of friction between the trading of our two great nations, and retailers are definitely looking forward to improved transit between our two countries.
Well, as you know, I was up in Canada last week, and it was suggested to me when the story broke that he who shall not be named was suggesting that the bridge might be held up. The suggestion was made that perhaps if it were to be named after said person, that maybe this would get it across the finish line. And I said, I don't know if the Gordie Howe narcissistic sociopath bridge is a particularly good name.
Well,
which got a laugh, which was all I was going for.
That's all you were going for. Well, the funny thing is Gordie Howe, a great a hockey player, played for Detroit, actually, Canadian.
Yes, right.
He is the originator of elbows up. His strategy, Gordie Howe was very famous going to the corners, and you would quickly receive an elbow to the back of your head. So it all comes together in some kind of magical way. Anyway,
full circle. Comes full circle.
Full circle. All right. That's it for this episode.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to StephenPDennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.